Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation with David Cattler, Director, DCSA. Now, please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Good morning and thank you, Allie, for the introduction. Welcome to today's program. We're excited to host one of our community's top leaders for the second installment of our three-part series addressing emerging security threats, sponsored by INSA member SIM Software. Just before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and I know many of you have already submitted them, but it's not too late, please submit them through the question box on the right side of your screen. We have over 600 registrants. I think it's 610 technically for today's program. So I will do my best to get to as many questions as possible. We're also pleased to welcome members of the press to the program. Please note that it is on the record and being recorded and will be available on our website later this week. And lastly, a big thank you to our host sponsor, SIM Software, for their support of the series. We could not bring you this level of thought leadership without them. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, David Cattler, who is the Director of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, otherwise known as DCSA. DCSA is the US's government's premier provider of integrated security services. In this capacity, David leads the agency's strategic transformation and maturation, overseeing a workforce approximately of 12,000 federal and contract support personnel worldwide. DCSA uniquely blends industrial security, counterintelligence support, personal vetting, and security training to advance and preserve America's strategic edge. The agency is a strategic asset to the nation and its allies, ensuring a trusted federal and industrial workforce and enabling industry's delivery of uncompromised capabilities. Previously, David served as Assistant Secretary General for Intelligence and Security at NATO, where he informed and protected NATO decision-making. He has also served as a senior advisor to the DNI in multiple roles, supported combat operations while directing the DIA's counterterrorism efforts, and serving as the Joint Chiefs Deputy Director for Intelligence. I am pleased to welcome David to the program today. And just to let you know, he's just right down the hallway in another office. So we've had a chance to chat a little bit this morning before our conversation with you all. So David, welcome. Good to have you here.
Well, thanks, Suzanne. Really, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you, for the coffee and the conversation, and also good morning to you and everybody that's online. I'm really happy to be back with INSA.
Great. Well, you have been a big supporter over the years. I think the last time we had you on a program may have been about 2 years ago, maybe in July of 2022, and now you're in this new role. You are appointed Director of DCSA back in March. Just want you to share a little bit with our attendees what drew you to this role and how your priorities shaped by your past experiences in the intelligence and national security communities, including senior roles at DIA, ODNI, and NATO, have brought perspective to your role and also to the workforce there at DCSA.
Well, thanks a lot, Suzanne. Look, I'm really excited to be the Director at DCSA and really excited to be back in the US and to be able to continue to play a role in public service. I was encouraged by a lot of people to consider applying to be and competing to be the DCSA Director. And I was equally excited to pursue it back late last year. We interviewed in the springtime, so just a couple months after I had returned home from NATO. And as you said, really happy that I was selected in February and then appointed by the Secretary with the Undersecretary's recommendation in March, the end of March, to take up the role. Look, I think DCSA is a really great agency with a really important mission. It's very broad in scope. Welcome everybody to go to www.dcsa.mil and check it out. But I also feel like it's one of the most important agencies that a lot of people outside our immediate circle have not heard a lot about. And I think that's a real shame. Not only because the nation makes a pretty significant investment in terms of the budget, but you also have 15,000 people between government, civilians, and contractors that are working really hard every day to advance personnel security, industrial security, CI and insider threat, and the security training mission, mostly for DoD, but if you take a look at the personnel security mission, really for the federal government as well as a whole. For me personally, so what attracted me was the role, the people, and the mission to this function. Take up now to be the Director. it's a personal growth opportunity for me, which is a point I think I just want to share with people, because I feel like we don't say enough, frankly, about the fact that we also choose things, because we're not just passionate about the work, but we also want to continue to develop ourselves. I had security in my portfolio at NATO, as you mentioned in the title. I felt like I learned a lot there, technically and operationally, but I'd also tell you that I learned on a personal basis, on a professional basis, that I really misunderstood what security was about. I've been a career intelligence officer now for a fairly long time. Our interactions with security can be very limited. And I think, you know, sadly for most people, it's your annual training. And if you got a problem, you're going to see security. But I think the fact is that intelligence can't be effective without security. And good security is informed by really good and appropriate and timely intelligence. So that I think the two parts of our craft really are very symbiotic in the way that they should work with each other. And look, it's no small thing to be selected to be a director. It's a huge responsibility, a huge privilege, and I'm deeply honored and humbled to have been selected to be a director. Leading 15,000 people is not a small role, even if the mission wasn't as important as I think DCSA's mission is, and quite a privilege to be able to continue my service in that way. So what I really aim to do is to take DCSA to the next level, to build on the successes of my predecessors. We've been going through a startup. I think COVID extended it, so it feels like now about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in October, actually, since DCSA was authorized to come together after that merger, largely of personnel security efforts between the former Defense Security Service and the Office of Personnel Management's National Background Investigations Bureau, or NBIB. And I think that DCSA already does great things and has even greater potential as we look into the future. So that's what attracted me to the job, and it's been very rewarding so far in the first 4.5 months.
5 years, that's time flies, doesn't it? Hard to believe.
Yeah, it's just gone.
So I love the fact you mentioned that in this role, you know, you took it also because it was a little bit of a challenge, right? It pushed you, stretched you, helped you learn. You didn't use those exact words, but and it's important that you mention that. We've got students on today: University of Maryland, Georgetown, University of South Florida, Virginia Tech, University of Alabama at Huntsville, and so I think it's important that they hear that. You talked about taking DCA to the next level. So to do that, what are some of your top priorities for the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, let me talk at the strategic level first, because I know from our earlier discussion, there are a number of questions about some of the technical and operational tactical things we have going on. I laid out 3 big goals pretty soon after I joined the agency as we think about the future and where we want to go. And I just say philosophically, for me, these are also underpinned by a view that our mindset should be ambitious, that we should be properly aggressive. We should be on our front foot. We are the experts in security. This is the largest purpose-built security agency in the federal government. I would tell you, in that 15,000 staff, we got about 5,500 federal civilians. Within my first few weeks, I was able to run my first quarterly award ceremony. We had 103 employees earn Milestone of Service awards. So these are the pins we get each 5 years of service, and it's important, you know, to recognize that. And between the 103 people, we had more than 2,000 years of service. It's just amazing. I mean, amazing dedication to public service, and also amazing expertise. And then if you extrapolate that, like, I mean, how many millennia of experience in intelligence and security does the DCSA workforce have as a whole when you go out to 5,500 and even out to that 15,000? So what I've been trying to inculcate in them is, let's own our role, and let's really be seen first, to have other people see us as the nation's premier provider of integrated security services. I mean, it's one thing when you say it about yourself, even if it's true, it's that much more powerful when someone else sees that in you and recognizes that. And closely related to that is, I really want DCSA to be recognized as and sought out as your preferred partner whether you're in government or even if you're in the private sector, that we are here on the same team as you to help you be successful, to wrap security around what you're trying to do for the common good. So that's first goal. And some of that is about doing events like this, frankly, just getting out and saying this is who we are and this is what we're about. The second task I've laid, especially on the leadership team, is for us to be able to define and demonstrate that we are in fact at full performance in all of the mission areas that I listed for you when I introduced myself and why I was interested in the job. And I think we're really close. But the definition, what do you measure? How do you prove that you're at full performance is really important. We have a number of things where, to be very frank, we need to rebuild confidence in DCSA, in our ability to lead and our ability to execute. And this, I think, is an example of this. You know, as you know, and I'm sure many of the people that are online here are aware, we have just come out of a period of time where we've had to go back to basics and take a hard look at rebaselining that program to chart a course to get it back on track and for it to be successful. So there are things like that as well that need to be corrected, that I think, if you go back to like the book, The First 90 Days in Government, we're ending a fairly long startup period, and there are some elements of turnaround within DCSA that need to be managed. There aren't any issues that we can't solve with that great team and with the great oversight we get from the Pentagon, from the PAC, talk about Performance Accountability Council, and from our partners and the great staff. So I'm confident we'll move there. But then my third goal is to help DCSA posture itself for its future. And there's a lot in it. I'll be brief and amplifying, but the point I want to communicate to the audience is that part of that leadership is also to have the strategic vision. We are also the thought leaders in security for the department. We are a high impact service provider for personnel security for the federal government as a whole. That puts us in a thought leader role as well. Who better than us with all that expertise, with all that time in security to describe what the future might look like in terms of not just the threat, but how we should respond. What security capabilities, what security measures should we be implementing, and how do we measure compliance cooperatively with the federal government and with the private sector in that future? So I've challenged the agency to think beyond like 2030 people think about now, 2035. So for me, 2040 it's a close stretch to get to. It's reasonable. And to skeptics, what I tend to point out, is not just who better than you to chart that future and gain the necessary resources and authority approvals to get there, but the other challenge I give them is, look, that's 16 years from now. It's 2024. Let's go back to 2008. And let me just ask you, because I'm a new security officer myself, right? I got a hot minute really in security as the director of this agency. So what I tend to ask is, are you seriously telling me that you perform the same roles and functions in the same way against the same threat in 2024 as you did in 2008? No one does. No one that's serious says they do. So there's no reason for us not to plan to adapt, and to adapt in anticipation to outpace the adversaries between now and 2040, and to provide the appropriate security measures, the capabilities in anticipation of need over this next 16 years. So each of these three is very important, I think, to the agency. And I'm trying in the beginning not to have to spend all of my time on problems that need to be solved in the immediate or things that are more operational and tactical, but also to elevate the view, not just of the leadership team, but of the agency as a whole. And again, I'm just so blown away at the talent and the dedication and the energy in the workforce and in our partners. People want us to be successful inside and outside DCSA, and what a huge asset to have.
Well, as a leader in the conversations I've had with you, or when I've heard you speak, you really do focus on the workforce. And I know there are quite a few folks registered today from DCSA who are hearing that messaging. And in relation to the workforce, it's about keeping the talent you have and then recruitment. And I believe you all just did a capstone briefing with 73 college interns, which is a very impressive number. And you were telling me about, some of their strengths and areas of expertise. And if they are also the future of DCSA, I think you're in really good hands.
Yeah, Suzanne, I can't, super impressed. Not just the workforce as a whole, but now just look at interns. The DCSA intern program has grown substantially over the last 3 years. So as you said, we now have more than 70 interns currently enrolled, and many of them are multi-year returnees. Some stay, some choose to stay in the same field of work within DCSA, and we have some that have also chosen to move around. We have some that have worked for us for a summer and then have gone somewhere else and have come back. And we do hire, I'm told, a pretty substantial number of the interns out of this program because, frankly, we invest in each other. They invest in us. They really do things that are useful and meaningful, and we are investing in them. We're clearing them. We're bringing them in. We're assigning them an actual function, a role, a mentor, and they're getting around and they're doing work. I was really impressed yesterday receiving these briefings, not just with the passion and the energy, but look, I don't think I'm getting old, but I don't think I'm all that old. But I can't code. I don't know how to, use Microsoft automation tools on my own right now. I don't know how to get on a server and do models to forecast caseloads. And I understand the concepts of business process reengineering. I'm sure I'd make a fine management consultant, but I couldn't actually do the work. And I'm really impressed that they came in and they didn't just learn. They're really thoughtful about what they highlight in terms of what they took away from these experiences. But they have also left behind some really useful databases and tools and models, shorter business processes to improve efficiency that I see real value from them and from this program as a whole. So I just say to the audience, check us out on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. The application period for the fiscal 2025 intern program for DCSA opens on the 15th.
Okay.
While you're watching Emily in Paris on Netflix, you can also log on and sign up to be a DCSA intern. And I just tell you, if you're fortunate enough to be a match and to be selected to come in, I think you're going to be blown away by what you can do and what you're going to learn, how you're going to grow in that time.
Great, very encouraging. So you've referred in conversations to DCSA as the gatekeeper of the federal government. What does that mean to be the gatekeeper, and what improvements are necessary for DCSA in regard to the security reform process?
So I like the symbology of it, and I think the team that came together back in 2019, 2020 to work with, it was like an actual heraldry office that helps you with your logos and the crests and everything and all that design, that this was a really thoughtful decision. Let me put it in human terms as I go through the missions briefly to explain what the gatekeeper term means to us. First, look, only 1.4% of the US population holds an active security clearance. Now, it's about 350 million Americans, so you're talking about 3.9-ish million people. 95% of the federal government relies on DCSA for the background investigations and for the adjudication. Those agencies then take further decisions about access eligibility from there. We have 3.85 going on 3.9 million people actively in our databases. We just announced Monday this week that we have begun the soft launch of taking in the non-sensitive public trust population. So these are federal employees that don't need a security clearance for their job, but nonetheless need to be evaluated for trustworthiness. So we're in the low hundreds, building to more than 1 million in that population by the end of this coming fiscal year. So huge responsibility. But again, on a human level, what's going on there is we are helping the government determine whether it is in the national security interests of the United States to enter into a trust relationship with you. And then whether, I should say, we're in the trust business. That's what DCSA is about. So Can we trust you in the beginning, and can we trust you over time? How long should that trust basis endure? Everybody lives a life. Everybody has their ups and downs. And every time there's a reinvestigation, every time something happens and you self-report, that all gets reviewed and adjudicated. It's just part of the process. But first thing is trusted people. So generating that trusted workforce. Second thing, for industrial security, we handle the collateral part of the defense industrial base. We are the leading implementer of the National Industrial Security Program. So to geek out for a second, 32 CFR is what we're implementing. Huge responsibility, because what that means again is if you wish to do classified work and you're working out of your garage, or you've just opened your storefront, or you want to hire employees that are going to need security clearances, you need a facility clearance from DCSA in order to do that. And under 32 CFR, under the NISPOM, again, to run the National Industrial Security Program, you're either inspected every 12 or 18 months, dependent on what you do in that facility. Again, the collateral basis, SCIFs and SAP facilities are handled by other executors under different but related policies. So again, now trust in facilities. Can that facility be trusted in the beginning? Should it still be trusted over time? What can be done within it? We are measuring the compliance and establishing the trust basis in the beginning and over time to determine whether classified work should and can be done in that facility. So if you own a business again and you want to do that kind of work, you're likely to come into contact with DCSA. Counterintelligence and insider threat, very intimately related to the first two missions. And you're likely to see, especially if there are issues, your facility security officers, the assistant facility security officers, the corporate security officers, very likely to come in contact with DCSA persons. So now I'm up to trust in people, trust in facilities, trust in systems, because there we're also doing cybersecurity in close partnership with the defense industrial base, in that collateral portion of it. And we are also looking at risks of insider threats within the federal government and outside, in the networks of peoples that we're working with. We're also looking at foreign ownership, control, and influence, so FOCI. This is currently something that we do for mitigation, for security purposes, so that if you need to enter into an arrangement, like let's say you're a major foreign-owned defense company and you get a US contract that requires US security clearances and access to US classified information, again, if you're in the collateral part of the DIB, the defense industrial base, it's going to be us that works with you, and we will iterate with you on a defined timeline to come up with a plan for you to implement, and then we'll measure compliance with that plan over time. There's a new legal requirement, statutory requirement from 2020 from the National Defense Authorization Act, Section 847. So you're going to hear us say 847, for DCSA to do FOCI reviews of any company that would bid, so even pre-award, on a contract with the Department of Defense worth more than $5 million, and we will have 25 calendar days to get that done. Now, the federal regulation will soon go through its review period. We are working on software to do case management, to do data exposure, to data exploitation, to support that mission. There'll be a lot more public messaging and a lot of training within DCSA, between DCSA and law firms, between DCSA and the private sector, the companies themselves, on how to comply, what information needs to be submitted. So again, if you want to do business with DoD, just about anything costs more than $5 million, seems nowadays. You're highly likely to come in contact with us. And then finally, security training, right? So to ensure that the security professionals within the Department of Defense, and some by extension in the private sector and even in the international community, are trained to the necessary standard on the right timeliness, and that they also, as they need them, we can credential them at higher and higher levels to give them what they need to demonstrate in their professional portfolio to prove to an employer, federal or commercial, that they know what they're doing. And that's about 11,000 now credentialed people that we're actively maintaining year over year. We get about 1,000 to 2,000 new people that we bring in, cycle through in that. And we serve anywhere from 1 million over the last 5 years. We serve anywhere from 1.1 million to over 5 million online security courses through our security training directorate, which is killing it. Again, when you get that scope, out to people all over the United States and around the world. So that's what sorry, I went on for a while there, but again, the scope of what we do is so huge. So in a single sentence, what it means to me to be a gatekeeper is to be the front line of the establishment of trust for the United States federal government. That's the value add that 15,000 people and about $3 billion a year is giving the nation to undergird its national security.
And, you know, I'm really glad that you mentioned facility clearances, because I'm not sure when people think of DCSA, they realize that scope, right? It's not just the people, it's also the physical space as well. And you mentioned trust over time. And that comes back to a question I have about PAC-PMO, which is, for those of you all who are not familiar with all the acronyms, the Performance Accountability Council's Program Management Office. And DCSA recently implemented a transition from a periodic reinvestigations model to a continuous vetting process. Can you explain why this transition was needed and how it will benefit the federal workforce, including the IC, both public sector and our private sector contractor community?
So first, let me say, this is huge. I mean, this is a revolution in the way that the government handles personnel security issues. Look, I've been doing this now 33 years, I think I have, of credited service between military and civilian. When I began, you got your initial investigation, you got that adjudication, you got your access eligibility, you were read in, you were read out. And every 5 years, when I was in uniform, I got reinvestigated. And once I joined the intelligence community, every 5 years, I got the added bonus of the polygraph, you know, to prove my credibility over that period. Look, it takes time and it's expensive. Certainly compared to what we do for continuous vetting, it's very expensive. You're talking several $1,000s, you know, more than 5,000, 5,050, 500 for a top secret investigation, for a full scope initial investigation to be done, but less than $100, depending on your level of the trusted workforce policy implementation and the number of databases that we use to review you through CV, and the IC does CE, continuous evaluation, but same principle under same policies. So instead of spending a few to several $1,000s, I can spend $100 with an initial startup cost for the enrollee, massive cost savings. But let me emphasize the why. Why does the PAC exist? Why do we have the Trusted Workforce Program? Because the government and our citizens recognized that they agreed that the nation needs to be able to more easily and reliably draw upon the very best of the United States. And that we should be able to get those very smart and talented and hardworking people in, balancing speed with the trust basis establishment. And if I were still like a private citizen, not a civil servant, I would be looking at this saying, well, I want to get on board. And some of it is, I'm just anxious to do the nation's work. And another part of it could also likely be, I've got other offers, you know, and I want to do this, but I also, and I want to have some mobility opportunity. I want to be able to come in, I want to come out. I want to be able to change agencies more easily. So my master's is in policy management. So I find policy fascinating, not just on the content, the substance of it, but also on the process of policy. And I got to tell you, I am a huge fan of what the PAC has been able to do. And consider this is now over 2 administrations, we're saying. So huge consistency in the demand from the White House on down into the interagency, huge consistency in the policy priorities, and we are achieving some real successes. So on CV, we currently have more than 3.8 million people enrolled in the continuous vetting services that DCSA provides. And those are not just from DoD, but those are really from more than 90 departments and agencies across the federal government. So we're doing that service for them. And what it actually gives us in practice is that a scale that you could not, even if you could technically achieve it, you couldn't afford to pay for the investigators, the humans, to actually get out in the field and talk to people or even do those interviews online for the time it would cost you just for the labor, to say nothing of the related IT and everything else. So the thought here, in addition to taking some really what are bold in policy terms, but I would say absolutely appropriate. I mean, they're not risky, right? We're able to manage the risk here as we go from that 5-year touch to CV. But it's what gives you the scale. I mean, how else could you handle more than 3.8 million people? How else could you initiate? I mean, my agency alone, this is, again, we're the largest investigative service provider in the United States, but we alone initiate 10,500 to 10,750 investigations per day. We are clearing more than 10,500 to 11,000 investigations per day, 2.3 million investigations per year, and 688,000 adjudicative decisions we took in fiscal year 23. You could not reach that scale if the White House on down here, I mean, now the DNI as the security executive agent under the PAC structure and the Office of Personnel Management as the suitability EA had not had that inspiration and had the consistent policy support, and if agencies like mine had not been charged with, empowered to go off and do that work, it would have been impossible. And the federal workforce and the cleared defense sector, because remember they're covered in those numbers, also continues to grow as the economy grows. And so critically important that we have these policies in place. Anyway, I could go on and on about this for a long time. I'm just a huge supporter, and on a personal basis, a huge fan of this program.
Well, and it's been really encouraging to witness the synergy and collaboration between you and Matt Eames at the PAP-PMO. And I think that will serve the community really well. So I have one more question that we scripted out. And then somebody accused me last week of not getting to audience questions. So we are going to do a rapid fire after this next question. Sure. And I'm going to take some audience questions. But IMBIS. IMBIS plays a really crucial role in personnel vetting. You've spent a lot of time reviewing the IMBIS programs. It's taking up your appointment back in March. Can you talk about some of the key milestones that IMBIS has recently reached? And I'm going to ask this question, and then, like I said, I'm going to move on to these audience questions.
Yeah, look, thanks. And I think fair. I mean, I'd love to start with the successes, but I think first, let me acknowledge, as I said in testimony to both the House and the Senate, IMBIS is unacceptably delayed, which is a pretty polite way of saying we need to fix it and we need to get it done. And we are working not just within DCSA incredibly hard to get that done, but also with great oversight from the Pentagon, from the PAC. We've got a lot of great partners that have leaned in with us. I am so fortunate that so many of our overseers and the leadership there in oversight and in our mission partners are people that I have had the pleasure of working with over the entirety of my career. And again, on the relationships, never discount the value of that too. If you get the right team together, it's not just about having the right people in the right, it's about having the right group of people in the same place at the same time. It will be better and it will be done. And we took full ownership of that in both the House and Senate testimony. In terms of milestones, we are already at the 1.5 milestone. That's the continuous vetting implementation for DoD. And that, again, is a technical thing. It's about the numbers of databases that we use for the CV and that full scope implementation for that population, again, that 3.8 million. Some of our customers are still only where we say at the 1.25 milestone, because we need to further build our system out to be able to get them up to that next level. And it's also got to do with how much they pay, the rates, the affordability. It's a hugely complicated enterprise because we charge even the federal government, private sector for the services we're providing. So for the background investigations and for the continuous vetting, we need to get that right. We need to have the service and at scale available to them. These are all things we're working through in this. We just closed the 90-day period just about a month ago for NBIS, and we've got the next major check-in coming up on the 23rd of this month to get through an acquisition decision that will then give us the scope of the go-ahead that we have for the way we can continue to work technically, the way the program manager can work on that program. We just announced on Monday, as I said, that we're bringing in the non-sensitive public trust population. That's another key piece of the work that we need to do together with the interagency for trusted workforce. But where NBIS does come in is that the fielding of an operational NBIS, National Background Investigations services, that can be used not just by DCSA, but by our customers inside and outside the government, is a requirement to get through the gate of the Trusted Workforce 2.0 milestone. So by not delivering NBIS on time with the requisite capabilities, we at DCSA have actually held the federal government back from getting that, to getting to that 2.0 milestone, which is also why we feel this great sense of urgency, to set it right and make it happen.
So I'm going to put my game show host hat on. We have 9 minutes. I'm going to try to get through 6 or 7 audience questions. So you talked about Trusted Workforce 2.0. Tanya Gray at General Atomics wants to know, will there be an annual requirement for cleared personnel to do an update version of the SF86 for Trusted Workforce 2.0?
That's a good question. I don't recall that that's a requirement. I could be wrong. Bear with me. I don't recall that that's a requirement. I was asked to update mine on the old regular cycle. I mean, I did my own in 2022. And because I was working at NATO, DCSA actually did handle my file when I went through that process. You are required, though, under the Security Executive Agent adjudicative guidelines, as I'm sure she knows and others know that are online here. As you have major reportable events, you are required to report those. We will be receiving CV alerts. If she works within our covered population, she is enrolled, as I said, in that 3.8 million-ish population. So even if you don't have a bulk requirement, and again, I'll check, but even if you don't have a bulk requirement to sit down and redo your SF86 from zero, you still have these enduring requirements even when you're enrolled in CV to continue to self-report. And we will anyway. So
maybe Tanya can send you a LinkedIn request and, if there's verification there. So John Nichols, good morning, has a question. He wants to know, thank you, first of all, for joining us, but can you please share your thoughts on the agency's clearance reciprocity for contractors?
Yeah, so this is another CV-enabled, like super good news story. So thanks for the question. By having that population enrolled in the services that we provide, we are actually able to execute to make a reciprocity decision usually in less than 1 day. And that is for DOD, yeah, sorry. And that is a massive, we are well below, because I think the target's like 65 days in order to get that done. Now, it usually begs the question of why does it take longer in some other cases? And the thing I'd say is it's absolutely appropriate that it takes longer in those other cases, because usually the mirror image is, well, why does it take so long to come into the IC? That is not my responsibility, but I am a career IC officer also. And the thing I'd say is they have medical checks, they have polygraph checks, they have some additional suitability reviews that have to go on. The identities and the records tend to be a lot more sensitive. The nature of their requirements tend to be a lot more sensitive. And therefore, the security executive agent has given them policy dispensation to add additional requirements for that process. But our processes do already come together and will continue to come together as we move through the Trusted Workforce 2.0 milestone, in that as my system at DCSA fields, as NBIS fields, and the OD&I fields, the system called Porous, that the DNI, PDDNI have also spoken about recently in testimony, you'll have better data integration and better data handoff for those additional reviews that the IC needs to do. And we'll have even more automated information to come into us, for people that need to join the DoD workforce. So I expect there'll be some improvements. I recognize it takes a lot of time to go in certain directions, but the more I know, the more I realize that those timelines, while long and I know on a personal level can be really annoying, they're legit.
Well, it sounds like the process is in very good hands under your leadership. So Greg Torres at Booz Allen Hamilton, Greg wants to know, DCA doesn't routinely share industry PERSEC reporting with DoD component security offices and SSOs. Do you envision that changing?
Yeah, so this is a question I've already had to tackle a couple times because I've heard from some CEOs and from some corporate security officers this is an area we should pay close attention to. And I tell you, it's because here's the way the question hits me, because it's not just limited to insider threat issues. It's about counterintelligence issues. It's about things that come up in personnel security reviews, the investigations, the CB reviews, and so on. And I think what we're trying to do is work through striking the right balance between civil liberties and privacy protection, protection of sensitive activities that go on related to counterintelligence efforts, all that collect. And I should say, to be very clear, we don't have counterintelligence executor authority within DCSA. CI is in the title. We have a very unique role, I say, especially as a former intelligence officer, in that we're not recruiting sources and running operations, but we do issue intelligence reporting, and we are a good pass-through because in that, I have 2,500 people in the field. We're in 174 locations in the 50 states. We touch the defense industrial base at a scale that our CI operational partners can leverage, but can't usually afford to do on their own. I am trying to push the boundaries on first sharing information, the data. I mean, think about how much data we sit on when you talk about 3.8 million, it's actually 6.75 million records that we're tracking between recent departees and active files. 12,500 facilities, 10,000 guys, it's just massive. It's got huge investigatory value for our core missions. It's got huge value to my intelligence community partners for CI and for counter-espionage to assist in protection of the US's national security and competitive edge. And I get it's critically important to the private sector also. Physical security, because there are real risks of violence, sadly, in our workforce, even in our cleared workforce. There are also real insider threat risks that manifest in unauthorized disclosures that range everywhere from stealing proprietary tech and intellectual property to media disclosures to espionage. And we do want to be the best partner, as I said, that we can be. So we're going to push as far as we can here, but I just ask for a little grace in this because the law is crystal clear on what we can and can't do. We may need some authorities changes and some do some pilots and do some experiments. But I want to also reassure people, I mean, just remember, the DCSA was created in no small part because of the hack of the Office of Personnel Management back in 2015 timeframe. I take, and I know my team does, incredibly seriously the responsibility to protect those records. That, like, if not job one, man, it is like job 1.1 to be sure that we do that. And so when you start to have discussions about could you share more information outside your agency's limit, you got to be really careful to do it right and to think through all those potential risks. But I am pushing on that, and I really want to see what we can do.
Okay, so I have 1 minute. I'll try to sneak in 1.5 questions. So Christy McAbee at Michigan State has a question about AI, and no coffee and conversation would be complete without an AI question. She wants to know, do you see a future in which AI technologies are used to conduct vetting and support background checks?
Yes, I do. And we have already experimented with AI, and we have implemented AI at a scale that I wish was greater. I see DCSA already, and as we move out into its future, as a data-centric agency that is engaged in security operations, again, in those categories I listed for you. There are already things that are commercially available and available elsewhere in the government that are AI enabled that I am intensely jealous of and wish that I had within my own agency. So you should also see us push experimentation and then incorporation of AI and machine learning, big data exploitation, structured and unstructured data, et cetera, and workflow enhancement for efficiencies and effectiveness as part of that DCSA 2040 initiative.
Great. So one last question. This is from Richard Ray at UTELSAT in Washington State, and it's kind of in the weeds. So this may or may not be one that you've got the answer to at the moment, but he wants to know, when is the revised SF 328 certificate pertaining to foreign interest going to be issued?
I don't know.
Like I said, it was a little in the weeds.
I hate to say that, but I am confident that I know people who do.
Know the answer. Great.
So Suzanne, I'll send you an email with
Okay.
and then you help me get
Richard, you can send me a LinkedIn request and I'll get back to you about that. So we are unfortunately out of time. Really, really appreciate your coming in here today and our offices in Ballston in person to join us. Any closing thoughts you want to share with our attendees before I give them a preview of what's next?
Yeah, very briefly. First, thanks for the time. Thanks for the attention. I see there are 240 people online, and I guess a lot of other people will watch the video later. I love what I'm doing. I'm super proud to be the director of DCSA. I think really important agency. I can't even describe for you how proud I am of the workforce and the hard work that they're doing every day on behalf of the nation's security. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Join the team. If you're a college student and you're looking for an internship, seriously, 15th of August, today's the 14th, tomorrow, that will open. Log on and check it out. If you choose to make your career at DCSA, there's a place for you. If you choose to work somewhere else in the federal government, God knows I've worked in plenty of places, that's cool too, because it's a team win. If you come into public service, for you to go anywhere else, start your career with us. Try it out. I think we'll set you on a good course, give you a solid foundation. And then finally, I would tell you, you heard from Matt Eanes, you heard from me, you're gonna have Mike Casey, who's awesome, who's gonna come in, a really good friend of mine and colleague, gonna talk to you from NCSC. So he is really the lead for the DNI in a lot of ways for security and counter intel, but especially she executes that security executive agent role. He's also worked on the Hill extensively. So he's gonna be able to bring a great perspective. Save the hard questions for Mike. I know he can handle them, but look, I mean, so many talented teammates at DCSA and colleagues that I know would love to speak with you on a range of issues. So look us up, either here through INSA or at other public-facing events. I think we've got a great story to tell, and we're happy to share what we're doing for you. So thanks so much.
Thanks, David. I know you're going to stick around for a couple minutes and talk to our INSA graduate student interns who are all looking for jobs in the intelligence community. But just a quick shout out to Sim Software, as you see from our fancy backdrops, for sponsoring the series. We have a couple of online virtual events coming up, one on August 20th, and then the next on August 22nd. I encourage folks to take a look at our website, and then our in-person AFCEA and INSA Intelligence and National Security Summit on August 27th and 28th. When this closes, there is a survey. Please fill it out. Let us know what you thought, who you want to hear from in the future, and everybody have a great day. And thanks so much again, David.